Throughout the history of college football, we see teams and players rise to the top. Sometimes dynasties can last a long time, but the man leading the charge changes. Even if a player reaches an incredible feat, someone else always steps in. This is 3 more college stars that you haven't thought about or have completely forgotten. Really quickly, I gotta give a shout out to my sponsor, Gridiron Amino. Without them, it wouldn't be possible for me to continue making these videos on a consistent basis. But let me tell you guys about this app. It's a social community built by and dedicated for die-hard NFL fans. Essentially, it's like throwing a Bleacher Report, Reddit, and Discord all into one place. You can participate in polls, take a bunch of different quizzes, you got chat rooms to talk amongst fans, and I think it's pretty sweet that you can check live scores right in the app. And there's so much more that I didn't mention, so make sure to check the description for the exact link. My name on the app is simply KTO. And I'm down to hop into a live chat with anyone who wants to talk football. Okay, now let's dive into this list. Number 1. After receiving looks from over 70 schools, Chris Winky committed to Florida State in 1990, in the same class as Charlie Ward. And if you don't know who that is, well, he won a Heisman Trophy and a national championship. Anyways, for Winky, he was also drafted to the MLB. And after being on campus for only 4 days, he chose the route of professional baseball. Because of Winky's incredible talent on the football field, Bobby Bowden promised him if he ever decided to return, he would still hold his scholarship. And 7 years later, after never reaching the majors, Winky came back to Florida State.
He's played football, but he just hasn't played in 8 years because he spent 6 years playing minor league baseball.
Chris Winky was a jaw-dropping talent. He had the size, 6'4", roughly 235, with a big arm, and the poise and moxie that coaches dream of. As expected, he created fireworks, along with his best playmaker, Peter Warrick. Warrick would never be that great in the pros, but man, he is up there for one of the most exciting college football players of all time. In 1998, sadly, Winky's sophomore season ended in injury. They were ranked number 2 and still made the national title. They probably would have won the game if Winky never got hurt. The injury was pretty rough though, and required surgery to repair. There was doubts if Winky would even be ready to play, let alone return to an elite level. 1999. Chris Winky, along with Florida State, played with a chip on their shoulder. It was their year, and they matched up in the national title against Virginia Tech. Chris Winky versus Michael Vick, 2 very different quarterbacks. Even with an outstanding performance by Vick, Florida State overall was just too much for Virginia Tech. The next season, Winky did not slow down. He would go on to win the Heisman Trophy, 11 years removed from high school. He became the oldest player ever to win the trophy, and he'll probably hold that record for a long time, if not forever. With one of the most decorated careers ever, he led Florida State to its 3rd straight national championship appearance against the Oklahoma Sooners. Florida State was going to crush them. Their roster was dominant. They had already been on the big stage, and Chris Winky was the best player in the nation. But as the old saying goes, defense wins championships.
Winky wants to throw a screen. It's blown up again, and it's Torrance Marshall again.
After his final game in college, Chris Winky's pro career was forgettable. In the time he did play, he had some pretty awful stats. He does have a few records for the Carolina Panthers, including throwing the most interceptions in a rookie season. But to end this on a positive, the man was a monster in college. With one of the most impressive resumes for a quarterback, he had his jersey retired at Florida State, and deservedly so. Number 2. The team who shut down Chris Winky in his final college game produced a legend of their own. Before I state his name, you all know Sam Bradford, former Oklahoma quarterback and Heisman winner. And you all probably know that he has a history of constant injury. Well, it seems to run in the bloodlines of Sooner quarterbacks. Let me introduce you to Jason White. Jason White came into Oklahoma in 1999, and as a true freshman assumed the role of backup quarterback. After very limited playing time, he redshirted in 2000, which is also the year that Oklahoma won the national title. Coming off his redshirt season, Jason White's career started about as good as it can get. After the starter went down as the backup, he led the Sooners to a huge victory over number 5 Texas. And then in the week after that, he threw for 4 touchdowns. With a huge game against number 3 Nebraska the following week, Jason White would end up tearing his ACL. The Sooners would go on to lose, throwing out their hopes at another national title. The next year, after winning the job, just 2 games in, White would tear his other ACL, and because of NCAA rules, he received a medical redshirt. 2003. Now after multiple ACL tears and knee reconstructive surgeries, Jason White now couldn't run. He couldn't even take a snap under center. It was so bad they literally ran every single play from shotgun. Although based on his stats that season, you would say that he was more than fine. 40 touchdowns and only 8 interceptions, as he went on his way to winning the Heisman Trophy, taking it over a list of some pretty talented dudes. But 2003 would mark one of the most controversial moments that the BCS system ever had. Let's start off with the AP and BCS rankings going into the conference championship weekend. At number 1 in both was Oklahoma, followed by LSU and USC. All 3 of these teams had 1 game remaining. Both LSU and USC were battling for the number 2 spot in the national title. The only thing that can guarantee them the spot is if Oklahoma lost. Matched up against Kansas State, they did lose, but not only that, they were also crushed, 35-7. LSU and USC both won. The next week, the AP poll went as follows: USC 1, LSU 2, Oklahoma 3. That makes sense, right? But in the BCS system, the one that actually matters, Oklahoma was still number 1. How is that even possible? Well, talking about the BCS and how flawed it was is a video for another time. For now, let's just say the system sucked. LSU would go on to win the national title over Oklahoma, but some coaches voted against this, and they ranked USC number 1 on their ballots, making it so the national title would be split between LSU and USC. Them being named co-champions is one of the worst things to happen in recent college football. But anyways, getting back to Jason White, he finished the year off pretty horribly. Back-to-back losses with awful stats. But now his knees were better. Well, more like they didn't hurt as bad. So he could actually kind of go under center. He also had Adrian Peterson behind him. Yeah, this offense was deadly. This was Jason White's 6th season. By the end, he had completed a pass in 1999 and 2005. Not a lot of dudes can say they completed a pass in their college career that far apart. After another spectacular season, he would finish just short of winning his 2nd Heisman, but he won a plethora of other awards. This time around, they would head into the national championship looking to avenge their loss a year prior, and to none other than USC. 4 of the top 5 Heisman candidates were featured in this game. USC would go on to crush them, and yet again, Jason White wouldn't offer much on the biggest stage. When it mattered most, he struggled. But this dude is one of the most well-respected college football players of all time. He's so special to the University of Oklahoma, they have a statue of him outside their stadium. There's not a lot of players that can say the same. Number 3. Most of you remember how dominant USC was during the Pete Carroll era. From 2002 to 2009, they were a consistent name when it came to national title talk. Earlier in the decade, it was Hollywood superstars on offense. But later on, even though they had lethal weapons all over the offense, they really prided themselves on tenacious defense. They were loaded with NFL talent. And with a history of legendary safeties, in 2006, they seemed to have found the next one in line, Taylor Mays. The man was a total genetic freak. At age 17, he listed at 6'3", 228 pounds, was a state champion sprinter, and was also the number 2 safety in the entire country. And coming in as a freshman, Pete Carroll told the press that he was already the fastest player on the team. According to Carroll, he clocked a 4.25 40-yard dash. which would have been better than the NFL Combine record at the time. Oh, by the way, he modeled his game after Ronnie Lott and Sean Taylor, two of the most vicious, hard-hitting safeties ever. Right off the bat, Taylor Mays was a difference maker. He flew all over the field. His range he could cover with his speed was insane. He earned Freshman of the Year and second team All-American honors. The defense was scary. They really didn't have a lot of weaknesses. To say the least, lining up against them would have been intimidating. For Mays, being that big, with the mindset that he had, it drew some controversy. There was an uproar from opposing fans. Even a congressman called him a headhunter on the field. He was a unique prospect for NFL scouts. He lacked some fundamental skills, yet it just seemed his athleticism probably could make up for it. In the NFL Combine, he actually ran a 4.4, so not as impressive as the time he apparently ran at SC, but still was the fastest time among safeties. Here's something kinda eye-opening to me. Pete Carroll, still coaching USC, really hoped that the Seattle Seahawks would take him in the first round. Just FYI, this is the 2010 NFL Draft. Pete Carroll began coaching the Seahawks in 2010. Well, the Hawks went with Earl Thomas, who ended up being a much better pro than Mays. After a few less than stellar years, he is now out of the league, proving that crazy athleticism doesn't always translate. But Mays left his mark on college football. He had some of the most brutal hits that you'll ever see. One play in particular stands out from the others.
Comes to the middle of this defense. Oh my goodness. That's why the rule is there.